Good morning. My name is Chris Caius. I'm Chairman of the Administration Committee for Kane County. And I'm calling this meeting for Wednesday, April 13th, 2022 to order at 10:16 a.m. Can we have a roll call, please?
Martin,
Martin present.
Herman,
Here.
Here.
Ford, Bras,
Buzz here.
Gums, Pirog,
Here.
Chepro, Caius. You have a quorum.
Kai is present. We have a quorum. Okay. Then may I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of March 9th, 2022? Moved by
Berman move.
Herman,
Froz,
second by Froz. Any changes, modifications, notifications? Nothing? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Ford, Bras,
Yes.
Gums, Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Guys, yes.
Approved.
Minutes are approved. I believe the monthly reports, finance reports are in the agenda. Is there any public comment online or in person? Don't hear any. Then with the indulgence of the committee, I'd like to rearrange the agenda slightly. We have Sheriff Hayne here to present an item on the Addiction Treatment Center, I believe. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Caius. So I think everybody's familiar. They've heard me talk about the last 3 years, about 20 to 30,000 square feet of open space we have at the sheriff's office. We had the concept to bring in a residential treatment center that we would lease to an entity to run out of the sheriff's office. We posted an RFP on that earlier this year, finally going through all the legal mechanics to be able to do it. We had about 18 people take a look at the RFP and we had 0 submissions on that. The feedback we got was the term of the lease was way too long. There's some stigma with it being on top of a jail, even though we're looking at Medicaid beds that would serve, and this is badly needed in Kane County. I need to reiterate that. Medicaid beds that would serve the people coming out of jail, those being referred from the courthouse, and just other people in need in the community, especially our low-income residents. So as we struggled to try and get this off the ground, I was approached by a real estate group out of Aurora at Church and Corporate Boulevard, if you can picture that right off of I-88 and Farnsworth Avenue. It's in an industrial park. They had a 48,000 square foot home for autistic children. Unfortunately, they were only in there for 5 years and they went out of business. So now it is completely vacant. It is perfectly modeled to house a residential treatment center right here in Kane County. So what I'm proposing is that the county take out a lease on this building and then we sublease that to 2 to 3 treatment centers that are willing to operate within that space. Also, this would provide potential housing for the health department for some of their operations, which I know is a need. It would offer us a mass vaccination, I should say a smaller vaccination site, not a mass vaccination site, as we look to the future to operate out of some of the area in there. Again, 48,000 square feet already completely built out, just need some touch-ups and makeups on it. But we're looking at a zero sum here to the county, actually potential revenue making while providing a desperately needed service to our community in the vein of Medicaid beds. So I'm coming here to just put that on your radar. I would like as our next steps to be, my next steps to be to go ahead with a similar RFP like we had for the sheriff's office, just to get feedback from other treatment centers. We've had about 3 or 4 on the line that are interested in subleasing already, but we really want to put it out there to see what kind of feedback we get and then move forward with further discussions of that lease from there.
Questions, Mr. Martin?
One very mundane. Where again? Was
I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, can you use your microphone?
Where again? I got too close the first time and it scared the heck out. Where again is this building?
Sure, it's at 998 Corporate Boulevard in Aurora.
That's on the far east side, right?
Yep, east side. Think of it just west of the Outlet Mall at 88 in Farnsworth. Blair, could you cue that video for me? We actually have a really quick, it's a 1-minute walkthrough of it. I meant to have this playing in the background as I was talking, but this will do the trick.
Okay.
Is that part of the property too?
Yes, it is. And that was part of our limitations at the sheriff's office. We didn't have a whole lot of rec area outside. Obviously, there's a playground there because it was for autistic children, but we can do whatever we like with that space.
Well, since I still have the floor, I mean, I'm supportive of the effort going ahead to see if we can do this. And again, I always say I'm at my best when I'm totally ignorant. It's hard for me to believe that nobody had an interest in the facility at the correction building.
Yeah, it does break my heart too, but with all the space.
Well, I mean, it's got all of the amenities
It does.
that the world says that they need. And it's beyond me to believe that nobody wanted to do it.
It literally sits right on top. of
So
the
what are
foundation that
you
needs-
going to do with the,
Well, with all of our
empty
space needs
space?
that we have here in the county, I mean, that leaves us open for further discussion on where we can move folks around because we're never going to build out. Let's look to the future. We built a 640 bed jail. That was supposed to be additional beds should the jail population increase over time. Our jail population is at 300 right now, and it keeps going down. Who knows what will happen with the end of cash bail and the new Safety Act, but we predict we'll never get to that 640 point. We'll never have to build upon that jail. So there's plenty of options that we can use that space for, from storage to housing other offices within the county.
all right, thank you.
And then, Madam Chair?
There we go. Now it's on. Thank you. I'd like to address what the perception is of using the jail as a potential site and the reason why the RFPs were not successful. When you may be arrested for a potential criminal act or what.
Madam Chair, can I ask, is that microphone okay? I'm having a
Is it
tough time
on?
hearing it.
There, that's better.
Yeah, get close on that one, I guess.
Okay, up close and personal with my microphone. So the jail, the perception of having a drug treatment facility at the jail is not for the well-being of the client who would be there. The jail is considered a punitive facility. I mean, you're there to be rehabilitated, yes, but you have to serve an appropriate amount of time. There's no place to go outside to visit with family, to reflect on perhaps the causes of your addiction, because you're locked up. You're in a facility that is for punishment rather than rehabilitation. So this allows the opportunity for potential clients to go outside, and that's why I said, is that land connected to this facility? Because it's a place to walk, to meditate. And it certainly can be controlled if appropriate, but these individuals are rehabilitated after their time in serving their time, perhaps in jail. This is their next step to get their lives together. So that's why the jail, in my understanding, why it wasn't a good facility space-wise. Yes, absolutely. But you don't want to go visit your family member at a jail.
It's the optics, man. Optics. I think Lewis had her hand up.
Thank you.
Anita?
Yeah, I was going to agree with you on the stigma, having it at the jail. When we first discussed actually having the big building there, that was one of the things too. How could we make it not look like you were going to the jail? So good idea, but bad. But I just want to comment on this property in Aurora. I'm very familiar with where it is, and I've actually seen the property. It would be an amazing thing for Kane County and a real feather in our cap to just have this kind of facility. And we all know the need is there, and to bring the proposal to us at no cost. I mean, so good, so good. And it's easily accessible from the tollway, from Farnsworth. I mean, perfect location too for anybody to get to. So I'm super excited about this. And thank you very much for all the things.
I do
that
want to
you do for
reiterate
us.
that there is risk involved. So we would be leasing it and then subleasing it. So,
Yeah.
you know, the onus is going to be really on the county. And I'm willing to take on that onus to make sure that it's filled with business and occupants.
Mr. Froz?
So question and then a couple of comments. Regarding what you just said, King County would not be operating this.
No,
Right.
we would be subleasing
To
to
be completely
experienced
100%.
treatment centers.
So, yeah, I guess the other advantage is I know we had some substantial build out costs at the jail as well as an elevator wing. I think we were talking about, so
Yeah.
it was not a inexpensive proposition. So, yeah, I guess you mentioned risk. That would be, as a member of this committee, my biggest concern. My recommendation would be to, get a letter, give them a letter of intent with like a 120-day due diligence. And then, during that period, see if you could get at least commitments or letters of intent from those leasers.
Do you agree that an RFP is the right way to go to truly solicit those folks?
Yeah.
Just to get their history and
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's important to, maybe buy us some, again, a due diligence period.
Sure.
Where we could maybe pull that off. And if they're really interested in doing this deal, 120 days would not be unheard of. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Froz. Any other comments or questions? Oh, Mr. Davist. And then-
A couple of the comments reminded me of something that I've asked about for many years. And Doug and Chief Judge will remember this. This may not be a fit. I thought I heard you say that the lessors or sublease wouldn't necessarily be the entire facility, which might leave some for what I'm getting at is I'm still looking for a neutral exchange site because of that feeling, just the vibe of having to go to the jail or to the sheriff's office. And when kids have to be handed over in domestic situations,
Sure.
it would be nice to not have to do that in the setting of the sheriff's office or police station. And I saw the playground and
Yeah.
I thought, oh, maybe this is our opportunity, Chief Judge, to
Yeah, no, it's very
find a
smart.
neutral exchange site so that kids could have a nicer atmosphere.
Very smart, Mr. Davis. It would be occupied 24/7 with staff, not necessarily police staff, but also there would be video monitoring. The cameras are already actually operational in that facility. So it's ready to go.
Excellent idea. Very
Back to
good.
Mr. Martin.
Whoever we're using as our consultant can help advise us on this point, but it wouldn't be unusual in a normal commercial context if you were going to buy a building that the lender would say, well, let's have a tenant first. And maybe the whole contingency period can have two facets to it. One, just looking at the general condition of the building, but secondly, giving us time to enter into leases as a condition of being obligated. I mean, I'd hate to have, a nice industrial building that obviously it has some attractive aspects to the use that we want to apply to it, but it was built as an industrial building. So that market in that building or that area must be a little softer than we would think. So if we could have in that contingency that we want to have the leases in place or a certain percentage of it, then we have some predictability.
Right.
We can be talking about security deposits and financial backing of the proposed tenants and all of that type of stuff in the same context.
And they are willing to waive, the owner is willing to waive our rent for 120 days to 365 days for, continued build out construction, cleanup of the
Well, and
place,
then,
operations.
and then, pardon me being old and cynical, then the question is why?
Because they're very anxious to have it filled. They have a.
Well, I
gigantic
understand, but if you have a money-making enterprise offering people a lot of free rent might indicate that you've got a problem. I just want to have our antennas up.
Certainly. So
I guess the
obviously that
plural is
business operated.
antennae. I want our antennae up as we,
Yeah, that business operated in there for, like I said, 5 years. It was built specifically for them. Now with 48,000 square feet, it's just too large for one single nonprofit.
just as long as we're going through the thought process. I'm
Yep.
not.
Back to Mr. Froz.
Yeah, the industrial's hot right now, but office is not. So this probably leans a little bit more towards office with the
I
building.
understand. I just,
What's the asking price?
For sale, they don't have it
Oh,
listed for sale.
you're talking about just lease. Yeah.
So they had offered a suggestion of a 10-year lease with a 5-year option to buy.
Okay.
And I do have a template of that lease if you guys would like me to email it to you, just so you can take a look at
And do
it.
you, just for discussion purposes, do you recall what the build out was going to be, the rough estimate of construction on the jail option?
Oh, the jail option. It was anywhere, depending on what model we went with, 900,000 to 7 million.
Yeah, okay.
Narrowed it down.
So that would go away.
Leaning towards
So
7
that's what we
million.
like to hear in committees, all narrowed down to.
I'm not like Joe Onzik. I can't give you a specific
That's good.
number off the cuff.
And then back to you, Madam Chairman.
If we're going to be moving forward with this, with the inclusion of the health department, I would like to invite the health department to take a look at it so that they can see if that facility does meet their needs and they can carve out a potential space.
Certainly.
Since it's going to be our lease, our health department should have the first opportunity to take a look what they feel is appropriate. And the other question I have, because of the population needs, will it be served by public transportation, PACE bus?
So it's right in the middle of an industrial park. So yes, there is a PACE bus route to that area. The great thing about it, a lot of treatment centers have struggled with the NIMBY issue, not in my backyard. Being in the middle of an industrial park, we're not going to face that. We do have to get, or I should say, the treatment centers will have to get a special use permit from the city of Aurora to be able to operate in there. But we've already spoken with Mayor Urban, and I would call him supportive of the idea, especially because it is in that area of his city and he understands the needs that it serves.
Very good, very good. Thank you.
Great. Okay, if there's no other questions, then I'm just asking for a consensus. There's no objection that I hear, then we have a consensus to proceed, to investigate.
I will keep you all posted.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the next item, I believe we will move down, is it to number 10? With my number 10, the resolution for the judicial center, was that the one? Judge Hull, present. Welcome, Judge. The floor is
Hey.
yours.
Good morning. How are you? So we are before the board, before committee today, asking you to approve the resolution that was sent out in your packet. Just to give you a brief summary of why we're before you. As you know, or many of you have heard, there's been legislation passed that's going to go into effect on January 1st of 2023 called the Safety Act. It's the elimination of cash bail in Illinois. As a result of the legislation, there are a number of things that the court system is going to be required to do for those hearings, which includes holding court 365 days a year. We do that now with bond call, but legislation calls for pretrial detention hearings, which are going to be anticipated to be much more lengthy. And ultimately, the end result is, as we go through and we look at our space needs, right now in 005, where our current bond call is heard, that courtroom shares both bond call in the morning, but also hears emergency orders of protection and also plenary order of protections in the afternoon. As a result of the new legislation, that courtroom is going to have to be hearing pretrial detention hearings all day, every day. And so now we need to find a room to send our orders of protection to. And again, orders of protection are so important. Obviously, it goes without saying. We worked with Roger. I've been in contact with Mr. Caius to look at any available space. The only available space at the Judicial Center now is the multipurpose room, which is 001 on the lower level. We work with White and Company, thanks to Mr. Feinstock, and we have a design plan that's done. The resolution asks for approval of $777,000. Doug, I don't think that includes the technology though, correct? So that does not include the technology. But this is a situation where, again, number one is we looked to available space. I know I've talked to Madam Chair and many of you about that. Do we have any space that we can use right now? The answer is no, we don't. Then the next question is, do we have any space that we can turn or that we can use and turn over? This is an existing room, so we just have to build it out. And that's, ultimately a savings for the county. But I'm here to answer any questions you might have. But again, I think it's important to understand that, again, this is legislation that's passed. We had no control over this. We don't have any control over it. What we do have control over and what we do need to do is be prepared for January 1st of 2023. And this is a step in that process. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Okay, any questions from the committee? Jump ready, Mr. Frost?
I'm just thinking big picture, but I know we have some people working over in the multipurpose building and facilities management. I'm not sure if that's state's attorney or does anybody recall?
The
Pre-trial,
state's attorney.
That state's attorney.
trial diversion. I believe.
This would provide enough space where we could get them back in the building.
Well, Mr. Feinstock, do you want to talk about that? Because I know you.
So that I believe the multipurpose room is unrelated to the state's attorney pretrial diversion group. They're looking at potential office space in the branch court and a couple of other locations. Last I had heard, State's Attorney Mosser and Circuit Clerk Barrero were going to meet to discuss the use of a portion of space in the North Campus or the King County Branch Court. I don't know that that meeting's happened yet.
I'd just like to get them out of building management as soon as possible.
Yeah, unfortunately, when we had White and Company there and they did the design, it's just a regular sized courtroom that we're going to need because we have petitioners, respondents, witnesses. The hope that Ms. Mosser has is that we can also use it for grand jury. I believe she's been in front of you or at least talked about possibly changing what's the grand jury room, which is in her office, and changing that to office space because of her needs. And her hope was that we could use this room for grand jury. I told her we're certainly willing to explore that. The issue is when the grand jury meets, where do you hold emergency orders of protection and plenary orders of protection? So, but we're working with Ms. Mosser and again, building and grounds on that.
Okay, so the ask is 750, I think you said.
Yeah, it's 777 right now.
77.
But again, that does not include, with everything now, the technology is a significant component. Doug, again, did you have a chance to talk to an estimate as to the technology?
Would be anywhere from 60 to 75,000.
Okay, so about 850 all in.
Correct. Correct.
So, whether we.
I'm sorry, we need to hear that. Can you,
Doug said between 60 to 75,000.
thank you.
But again, with that, I mean, when you say ballpark, that's ballpark because
Yeah.
it depends on supply and.
So assuming we all agree 100% or whatever then the next question is where do we get the money? So I haven't heard anything on that end, but.
Okay, so,
your
yes,
situation.
so couple, because Mr. Martin, when I tried to reach out, his question was, okay, who's paying for it? And so there's a couple different thoughts. One is we do have a fund which is getting replenished on a monthly basis. Doug, the latest figures, it averages around somewhere between $50,000 to $55,000 a month. Right now that's depleted because we're using that for the build out at the JJC, but obviously that will replenish in time. We also hope that again, that perhaps you would consider using some of your capital reserves, but that's obviously up to you and we're willing to work with you on that.
I'm chairman of the Public Building Commission and we do have some funds there that might be available, although I would rather keep them for a new government center, but that might get us through the project.
No, and Mr. Franz, I mean, and I understand 100%. And what we have is that thankfully we have an ordinance, which is we're going to replenish that fund. But right now, as I said, we're writing the checks for the JJC, and so it'll take a while. So we'd love to be in a partnership on that.
So I guess my position is I support the concept and acknowledging that we have to find the money.
And Mr. Martin?
Relative to all the legislation that's passed, which is why we're doing this. I was going to use the term open the spigot, but we're not getting anything here from the state in support of the legislation. How much more capital has anybody analyzed if and how much more capital expenditure is going to be necessitated by this legislation?
Is there any chance I can ask you to vote on this before I answer that question?
No.
Good.
Well, no. So the answer is yes. We've been working collectively. And again, the leadership of the county board, you've asked us when we first brought this up, what is this going to cost the county? And so we've continued to come back from a space need. This should be the only space need. From a added employees from the public defender's office, state's attorney's office, circuit clerk, because we're going to add a new courtroom. We're working on those right now to bring to you. Just to give you an example, and DuPage is not King County, but again, this is just all through reading and hearing, but The word on the street is that DuPage County is asking for somewhere between 12 to 15 new assistant state's attorneys. Now, we're not at that level. And in fact, as we look and try to work together, the state's attorney, PD, judges, we're trying to come to you with what we would see as a reasonable request as to what the added employee cost will be. So space-wise, I think this is going to be it, but employee-wise, we're working on that for the next
Well,
budget.
and the reason I asked it, and again, with no financial sophistication or knowledge applied to the question, is if we had capital needs necessitated by that, maybe we could bond some of that. If, you know, obviously we can't borrow salaries. So that's a separate, to me, that's a separate issue. But if we had capital expenses, I didn't know if that was a way of leveling off our responsibility. But if that's the only one we've got, then it's not a terribly important question.
Madam Chair?
We also go back to the pre-diversion program. I spoke with Martha Paschke several days ago, just light conversation. That program is increasing. I think that they're looking at hiring, she said definitely more people, to about 12. So I don't know how many right now are at the multi-purpose building and facilities, but there's going to be, let's say, 7 more. So there, and that'll happen relatively quickly.
It's just frustrating because we had a facilities management employee that needed an office, and I was told there's no room.
Yes, I know.
So, I mean, we just opened the place up and there's people from other departments using building management's office space. So they don't have enough room for their own people. So it's kind of frustrating.
Put them in the empty jail.
And just, I mean, to Mr. Martin's comment on bonding, if you'll indulge me, that it is a possibility. We were just talking about it before the meeting. You know, our capacity for bonding is tremendous. We hardly have a bond history even, to the point where it maybe even affects negatively our credit rating, because we, you know, just like somebody who's never had a loan. So the smart thing to do would be to package this in with in addition to the judicial center and or moving the government center out there with one bond, in my opinion.
Okay. But my thought is that when I go shopping for a new bathroom with my wife, which I have done recently, is she's looking at the 777 one and I'm looking at the 125 one. Is there this 777 is a magic number, or is there, do we have an economy model that we can check out?
I'll defer to Mr. Fonstock on that. We appreciate the guidance that he's given us when working with White and Company, but Roger?
Sure. So the price, as I understand it, is an all-inclusive design, and they would ultimately take it out to do the construction management. The 777,000 includes the architect design work to get the final plan set to go out for bids on the construction. So, you know, we have a tight timeline between now and the scheduled use of the location. So given the circumstances, we're trying to get White and Company to do the plan set to go out for the bids. I think that's the biggest time constraint or critical path for us right now. You know, the price inclusive of the tech and other things that need to go into the room. I think that someone mentioned $850,000. I think that's a discussion for finance to figure out, you know, where we might have funds to, you know, deal with that. You know, bonding for capital for buildings is certainly an option. I don't know if it's the timely option in this scenario. I think that would be something that would take maybe too long for this timeline, but it certainly for other purposes would, you know, definitely suit the county as far as the other facilities that have needs. So right now our timeline, I believe, Chief Judge, was January 1st.
Well, as of the law goes into effect on January 1st. So at that point in time, that's the first day that we begin to hold those hearings, and then we have no place for our plenary and emergencies.
You need it by December 1st.
And that would be really tight
Move in,
time.
yeah.
But I
We
think-
have worked with White and Company and I
Yeah.
can't say enough about how great they've been to work with, but he's building the same type of project to DuPage County where if you go county to county, we're all in that same situation with the time requirement. And so we have worked, and the reason that we're here before JPS is because based upon the timeline that Roger and White and Company gave us, we needed to try to move on this as quickly as we could.
Okay. Any other comments, Mr. Fonstock?
So again, this is Roger Fonstock. I think the interest would be to get the 777,000 and also try to bridge the technology planning portion of it in finance as well. So I do think that would be important because we would get to sometime in probably October, November, dealing with the tech planning. And right now, Charles Lasky's here. He can tell you the lead time for ordering any of that is incredible. We could probably order it today and we'd be lucky to get some of it by the time they open. So that's just been our lead time. It's 6 months to a year to order a lot of the different types of technology.
So we're looking at passing this resolution today with the anticipation of working the funding in the future. The details.
I think 850,000 at finance would be the discussion.
Yeah. So,
Um,
Mr. Frost?
Ross speaking. I'm just wondering, Roger, if we could find the funding for the IT portion of it somewhere else, and would it be possible to order the equipment now?
I mean, we certainly could. We haven't seen the plans for
Yeah.
the space. We have a sketch of the space from one of the architect quick renderings. It's not even to scale, but we could certainly start working on that. If it's kind of the question is cart before the horse. Do you order the equipment or do you wait until they kind of sign off on the construction? Once you sign off on the construction, I think we would probably order the equipment and try to work through the financial part of it during the month as it goes through committee.
My question is just, it's appropriate to do that, to ask for to pass the resolution without knowing exactly, but work on the funding later.
I think you're moving it to finance.
Okay,
Yes, you're
so
approving the
The concept.
Then I would,
concept and construction and I believe it names White as the architect.
Correct.
So at that point, it would go to finance to consider how do you budget.
Well,
Okay, so-
I'll move it.
then that's what I was looking for, is a motion.
Frost, second.
Mr. Martin and Froz. Any other discussion?
Uh,
Mr. Davis?
Supportive of this entire concept, and
Mhm.
in your bathroom shopping question, I am still a little curious there. I mean, I just heard Roger say that there's not even a scale drawing of this yet. So even though it's inclusive of the design work and the full package, which certainly adds to it, I don't remember the interior of 001 right now, but I have to tell you that I do get just a little bit of a gut feeling like, why is it that expensive to refit this existing space?
Well,
Why is it that much? But
Oh.
again, I support the idea. I know it's, we didn't really get a choice in this. They're forcing our hand. So I'm with you, but maybe the pencil can still be sharpened on that number.
Oh, and we're always willing to do that. But I mean, if you were to, anybody's always, you're always welcome, obviously, to come over. In that courtroom has been used as a temporary courtroom, and Doug could speak to it better than I could, but there was a temporary bench that was built where a judge sits now. The issue is that it's temporary, it's moved. And so what we're talking about, especially when you look at the topic of the cases that are going to be there, which are emergency and plenary orders of protection, we have a real opportunity to really give them a space because you have obviously victims, families, kids. And so we're always willing to work on that, trying to get it down.
Mr. Frost?
I don't want to get too far off topic, but whatever happened to the cafeteria, using that space?
Well, Doug, we always look at any space. So Doug, you want to come? I mean, during COVID, what we did is we used, and I'll just turn it over to Doug. Can you let them know about that?
During the shutdown and everything, we used the cafeteria for our jury assembly room to keep people there and socially distant. We do have a working cafeteria in the facility. They feed our jurors. They do feed some of the public. every day.
So
So,
it's needed. as
right.
of
And,
current
we
use.
put in partitions to make conference rooms for mutual ground AID to meet with their clients too.
You just hear different,
Yeah,
different opinions from different people. So
Well, we look at that space all the time, to be honest with you. I mean, and we use we use partitions during COVID when we had so many interpreters. So we're constantly trying to figure out how to cut that space because it's a huge amount of space that's not utilized a ton. If you go in there at lunchtime, is it utilized? It sure is. If you go down there at 10 o'clock, if you go down there at 3 o'clock, it's not. And so when we're looking for space, we're constantly looking to anything we can do to put people, and we're going to continue to do that.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Oh, Madam Chair?
One comment and a question. Is the question first, is the childcare center still open or is that still shut down?
No, it's been open and it is receiving children on a daily basis.
And that is, as everybody remembers, you have to walk through the cafeteria to get to the childcare center. I know there's another entrance
Yeah.
to that, but that's a very usable space. The other is that my comment is this is a want, it's a need. It's a need, it's not a want. We have to do this. So I think with that in mind, I agree that efficiency and cost savings are critically important, always are. But that'll be something that will be reviewed as we get further down the line.
And I'm going to ask Mr. Frost, do you have, Mr. Fonstock, start with an F.
So just to put it into some perspective, I believe that space is somewhere just under 3,000 square feet, maybe 2,500 square feet. It's about 40 by 60, I think. I don't know if that's correct. Doug might be able to correct me, but it's a large space. I mean, it's not like just a small room.
So it's,
Similar,
that's for you.
a little bit wider maybe and similar depth.
Okay, then Mr. Martin for
And
final.
we're doing a facility study, right? So some of these questions we asked today to be addressed by the long-term analysis that we hopefully are
Yes,
going to have in place.
yes.
Because we're all kind of whistling in the dark. Everybody can see a pockmark of
It's,
open space, and need and everything. We need a plan. So that we're not, and I know this is an emergency. We've got to do it. It's got to be done. It's not a plan. It's just somebody dropped a bomb on the roof and we have to defuse it right away. So, but we need a plan here because we have space all over the place in bits and pieces, and maybe it's sufficient, maybe it's not, but we've got to have a plan, or we're going to be somehow or other, we're going to be frittering away a lot of money.
Well, and the only thing that I'd like to add to that, and it goes back to what you talked about bonding and whatnot, is you guys have been great about coming over and looking at the space and taking tours. When we talk about adding employees, we have no space for those employees. So it's one of those things where I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Martin, about the planning, and we're trying to do that. And this is one of those things I wish we had some other option. We don't. But when we talk about adding those extra employees to the state's attorney's office, the public defender, the circuit, not the circuit clerk, because they're not in the building, but also court services, there really is no place to put them right now. But that's really the conversation after we diffuse this bomb, then it's going to be on to the next one, because we're going to have to figure out where those employees are going to be placed.
And would it be appropriate to have a limit on it? Or I'm just asking this, like no more than $850,000 or something like that? Because everybody says, well, we don't want it to get away from us. Does that come into at this point or in finance that we want to say that we don't want to spend more than a certain amount?
Mr. Chairman, this is Roger again. I think
Fonstock?
you could make that,
Is that reasonable or is that just,
you could make that assumption and pass it along to finance with that recommendation, but ultimately they would know the financial part of it better than anyone. So
Yeah.
I would like to say that we could separate the construction, from the tech so that you clearly define that there's 777,000 for the office space or the courtroom renovation, and then the balance would be for the technology.
and that's what this resolution calls for, is 777 anyway, so. yeah,
Yes,
so-
and it does not address the technology, so that would be in addition as
Right.
far as budgeting.
Okay, well, we've gone around a couple of times, I think. Is that we're in consensus, so I'm going to call for a roll call on this.
Berman,
Yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Ford, Bras,
Yes.
Gums, Martin,
Martin, yes.
Pius.
Caius, yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, great. Thank you, Judge Hall. Thanks for coming over and helping explaining it to us. I think it's really important.
It's great to see everybody and always willing to, any questions or if you want to stop by, please do. Thank you.
You guys
Thank
can take your suits off now.
I think we're setting up a
You
tour
got
right
your
now
money?
for 101, aren't we? Everybody wants to go, or what's the room? 101?
005.
Oh, 1.
001, okay. Admin committee tour. Look for us. Great, thank you. Okay, then we'll, thanks Judge Hall, and there's no other comments on that subject. We'll go back to our regularly scheduled meeting. And with facilities management, that it would be Roger Fonstock.
Okay, so I think we handled the item A1, which was the addiction treatment center lease. We have 2 facility usage requests. One is for Geneva Community Chest for a run. That one is for July 16th, and the other is facility usage for the chicken run at the government center also. It is April 30th. Both of those were submitted, and we're recommending just the consent of the administration committee to allow them to use the facilities.
By consensus.
Yes.
And Mr. Martin?
I just want it clear here. I'm on the board of directors of the Geneva Community Chest and on the 5K committee, so I'm going to be abstaining from offering a consensus.
It's not your donut
But you
day?
better give approval, let me tell you.
Now we know why it is a donut dash, right? Okay, well then, if there's no comments beyond that, I'll ask for a consensus. Is there any opposition to that online or?
What is the chicken run? What is a chicken
When-
run?
April 30th.
But who's sponsoring that?
The chicken run is, we had a Mary Agnes Zelmer
Farm Bureau.
put in the petition for
Icing.
that, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's the flyer. I don't know if you can read
If
the
the-
detail fine print, but we could get you a copy. There is some sponsors listed on there. I know they have Dick Pond Athletics is listed.
So this is a sponsored race. This is not a benefit for a not-for-profit.
No, they look for sponsors.
I think they,
Obvious. It's probably
It is a
not-
sponsored race, yeah.
CASA's mentioned on there,
Is it?
at the bottom of the first paragraph.
yeah, I can't read it. We could, I guess yeah, Blair, could you zoom in, see who the insurance is with? That would be the Chicago Race Management is the insured.
If you go up a couple,
Chicago Race Management is the management company which runs the race. There'll be a separate
keep going,
race management.
right there at the bottom, CASA Garden of Hope, or is that,
Oops. Agrees.
maybe that's just where they're meeting?
Nothing will disturb the Casa guy, so that doesn't sound like it's for them.
Or won't disturb the garden.
Oh,
Will
okay.
not, or will not disturb.
So I think this is just a sponsored race. And not a fundraiser.
Hmm.
That's what it appears to be at first glance. If you can send that to us, that'd be great. I'm just
Sure.
curious. I'm not saying it's.
Absolutely,
it's-
yeah.
we Should not.
It is in
support
the
it.
agenda as well on page 46 of 205.
Can suggest we give consensus for both.
Okay, then hearing no objection,
I think they've had it before.
we have a consensus for both of them. The rubber chicken sounds really interesting. Grab a rubber chicken and win. There you go. That's my kind of day.
Okay, thank you. We will have 2 races. We got the Donut Dash on July 16th and Chicken Run on April 30th. They'll both be at the Government Center. The next item is a resolution authorizing a contract extension for King County carpet replacement, and I ask for a motion and a second for the discussion of that.
Can I have a motion in a second, please?
Berman moves.
Ross,
Herman?
second.
Ross, second.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the resolution is for a one-year extension with Family Flooring of America in an amount of $150,000 or not to exceed $150,000. This is for our regular scheduled carpet replacement, and it's a budgeted expense. In talking with the staff, they recommended Family Flooring of America just renew their extension. They do good work and they're satisfied with the work. So we're recommending that extension, and it's budgeted expense for 2022.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Fonstock? Madam Chair?
I have just one general comment. If we are seriously looking and not just having a conversation about a new facility, government center facility, should we be putting money into our facilities, maintenance, absolutely, general maintenance, upkeep, et cetera, to keep it appropriately run and manage the heat, cooling, et cetera. But should we do aesthetics carpeting if we are seriously looking at having a new facility? And I think that perhaps is a thoughtful conversation, because I know we've been dancing around this for a long time. I know the board has for many years. And perhaps it's time that we either say we're going to be doing it and start developing that, or not. And say, well, we'll do it in 5 years.
Open to the floor for a little
And the
discussion.
way you've posed the question, if we are in fact serious about it, then I think the simple answer is, no, we should not be. I was hesitant even yesterday about $750,000 worth of, cameras and fancier doors. But security and safety take a little higher place than carpet. So
I think that's a good discussion to have. I think this is more on carpet. I mean, I understand how that fits into it, but
yeah.
this is for an extension of the carpet. If we can get that as a discussion item somewhere in our minutes, in the admin, I see that as an appropriate thing, but I'd like to get through the business of the day. Do you have a comment, Mr. Martin?
I do. I think that the reason we've commissioned the facilities review is so we can all sit and make a rational decision about what we want to do in the future. So I agree that we shouldn't, if the decision is going to be that we're going to do something else, that we shouldn't be adding to expenses related to this building as it now exists. But I think as I said before, we need a plan first before we, yeah. And we've got it it's coming. So
Sure.
let's get it.
The assessment and the master plan, I had talked to Jason Dwyer from White and Company, and I told him that he has to come next month to the administration committee and report where he is at with both of those projects, the assessment of the buildings and the master plan. And I told him that I am sure that the administration committee will invite you to participate in a committee of the whole meeting to explain the process and
Like
where
an
you're
excellent
at.
idea.
So he's expecting that. He is traveling this week. He wasn't available to come today, but I told him he absolutely has to be here at the next meeting. I originally wanted him here today. But regarding the carpet, a lot of the carpet is repaired on a case-by-case scenario. So it's damaged from water or from, leaks or other issues. Sometimes it's carpet that's just so old and worn that they need to replace it to make it a suitable office environment. So those are the types of things that are going on. This isn't planned like renovation. This is repair and replace existing carpet that's damaged or worn beyond use. So I don't know that you would be out of these buildings in the near future. It's going to take a while to, once you develop a master plan and you decide you want to pursue it, even if you pursue it, I don't think you'd complete that process in 3 to 5 years it would take to do that. So in the interim, replacing carpet, repairing carpet, we can definitely assess it case by case and make sure that we're not, renovating to the extent where we would, be wasting our money at the point that we're renovating something that doesn't need to be.
I wasn't suggesting that we
Yeah.
just shut things
Yeah.
off, but it's got to be in the context of knowing what the future holds. We've talked about some stuff today that just kind of piques my curiosity.
Yes.
We've got this possibility of of a building in the industrial park in the east side of Aurora. We've got a health department building that we know is deficient. Do we need that whole building for the treatment facility? Can the health department utilize? I mean, there's a whole bunch of questions that
Sure.
they need an answer so that we can sit and say, here's what we're going to be doing for the next 10 years here. So boards can
Agree.
make a plan.
Okay, then I'm going to call the question then.
Berman,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Bras, Martin,
Martin, yes.
Pius.
Caius, yes.
That's approved.
Approved.
So, Mr. Chairman, the
Yes.
item 5E is a presentation, and this is for the Geneva Creek Stabilization Project. We have Mr. Rob Linky from Water Resources and the Energy Environment. Rob's here. He's going to be talking about the creek. It's actually located here at the Government Center. For those of you that haven't walked it, it's this direction. I guess that's southwest, somewhere in that direction. But it's a creek that runs down the side of the Government Center property, and it also runs through the Forest Preserve property. The path that is along there goes to what would be the grotto from the original seminary campus here that was constructed. The grotto itself is on the Forest Preserve property, but there's a path and another creek and other things, including like footpath bridges and things along the way. So Rob and a group of us with Monica Myers from the Forest Preserve, I think Chairman Caius was there and a couple of others, but we walked this and we're looking at it and had, obviously for a reason, there were some concerns. So Rob's going to present and talk about what we're looking at in terms of the creek and stabilization and some of the amenities that are over there. And then we'll have a discussion about some of the next steps. So Rob, I'll be happy to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Roger. Good morning, members of the committee. Normally, I think this is my first time coming to this committee. Normally, I'm at the Development Committee, and we're talking about projects to address drainage infrastructure issues on other properties throughout the county. This is the first time that we're here talking about drainage infrastructure on county-owned property here, the Government Center itself. So I'm going to run through.
Glad you're here. We don't bite, so.
I'm going to go through some slides here, if I can get this.
Yeah, Blair, can you make that full screen and see? Slideshow. There you go.
There we go. Okay, so Roger had already kind of stolen some of my thunder, so thank you for laying that out. I'll have some slides to go with some of the description that he had given. If I go to the next slide to give some spatial context to this. So as Roger had mentioned, we're talking about Geneva Creek, which runs along the southern border of the Kane County property and then through the Gunnar Anderson Forest Preserve property before it discharges into the Fox River. Geneva Creek itself through the two properties is about 1,300 feet in length. This is an urban stream. The drainage area actually for this is about 1,000, maybe a little over 1,000 acres. If you guys can picture the intersection of Route 38 and Randall Road up there by the Meyer and the Julasco, that's actually the headwaters for this stream. So all of that drainage comes through that portion of the city of St. Charles and through Geneva, through the Geneva Country Club or the golf course there, and makes its way down here. And of course, the King County property here, the Government Center, is at the receiving end of all of that drainage. And the stream channel itself has a long history here on the property. I think there really hasn't been anything done. I think, again, as Roger mentioned, many people haven't really ventured down there. There is no formal trail system down there. There's some footpaths that are remnants from the original usage of the property and some bridge crossings in that. But it's largely been an area that really hasn't been utilized. The key feature on the site is actually just off the edge of the King County property, which is the grotto, which I have highlighted there. And then the slide before, you can see the picture of that. So this is standing in the stream looking up at the grotto. And that's really gained some interest over the last several years. I think when I started here in 2014, it was fairly overgrown. And over the time here, it's been There's been a lot of clearing that's occurred, a lot of activity and some restoration work. I would go out during lunch times and go for a walk. I think as many county employees would down there, and we've seen a lot of people down there clearing the grotto. So with that added interest down there, there's been a lot more notice taken on what's happening to the creek, which is immediately adjacent to the grotto and impacts the informal footpath that are used to access that. So zooming into this a little more, so this is kind of turned a little bit of an angle there just so we can fit on the slide. We see the areas in red, the blue shows the creek running through the site, through the two properties. The grotto's highlighted there and with a little yellow icon. The orange represents the informal footpaths that come through the site, and then the red represents areas of severe erosion. I'll just kind of quickly go through a couple of the slides going from upstream or the west end to the downstream end on the east, just highlighting some of the erosion. This is where it comes under Route 38, the large culvert from the city of Geneva, and some erosion that you can see there, partially in the right of way, partially on the county's property. As we move down through, this is the first bridge. This is an existing footbridge there. The abutments are, well, let's say the bridge is there. It's not really 100% stable. The abutments have been sort of undermined over the years. We believe a lot of the boulders in that you'll see in many of these pictures, we believe that those actually were put in as part of like they're imported. They're not natural. They're not glacial boulders from the system. So we think they were put in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, that kind of thing. But as the stream has changed over time with the the flashiness that's associated with all the runoff that comes in from that urban watershed, again going all the way up there to the Jewel Asco site, and without any maintenance or management of this area, there's been a lot of erosion occurred. And to the point here, you can see the footpath has actually been completely or almost completely undermined there, as well as the bridge itself. There's a lot of historic infrastructure. I'm not even really sure what the concrete post is in there, but that actually used to be upright on the side of the stream, and now it's actually in the stream as it's kind of meandered over to the side. There's been a lot of erosion. You can see here it's about a 5 to 6 foot vertical stream bank height where the stream is actually trended or eroded to the north as we travel downstream. And then there's some very large areas. This is probably the worst one. You can see there's our 15-foot survey rod that I put on the opposite side of the bank. So there is a couple of areas where we have some real extensive loss of the stream bank. So all that material is washed down into the stream and then down into the Fox River and contributes to the water quality problems that we have in the river relative to the Kane County properties. Certainly, it's a pretty massive area of erosion and potentially a public safety issue there for anybody that would be accessing that part of the property. This is the bridge number 2. So this is also on the actual Kane County Government Center campus. And this bridge was washed out a few years ago. And you can see the users of this area that frequent this have actually kind of made a makeshift bridge with some timbers and some kind of an old fence or something like that. So there's people that are continuing to go down there and use this area. And then as we get down, this is just showing the footpaths. Again, these are not maintained trails. There is no facilities management or King County Forest Preserve staff that we're aware of that do any kind of management or maintenance of these areas. So these things are just the old paths that were left over from the previous owner of the property, and then the continued access from any of the public that use those.
Why is it painted blue?
That's a good question. That would be
Graffiti or-
users of the property. There is some occasional graffiti that occurs, but yeah, that's, I believe, somebody that was an attempt to cover up some previous graffiti in that area. And then you'll see, for example, like there's a very large old dead tree that had fallen across the path years ago. And again, since this isn't an area that's formally maintained or managed, people just kind of step over those and that kind of thing. Getting down to the grotto itself. So this would be standing on the Kane County government campus property proper. So this is standing on the county's property and looking at the Forest Preserve's property. You can see the stream bank erosion. This is, we estimate this is moved laterally or horizontally anywhere from 5 to 8 feet as it's continuing to kind of chew into that northern bank. And so much so that it's actually threatening the access to the grotto itself. I think the next slide here, if you look on the right there, you can see these are the steps going away from the grotto. So on the right, the grotto would be directly behind me in the photo. And literally now the steps are at the point where if you keep going, it's basically a 7-foot vertical drop into the stream channel. So this is kind of where the interest has come from in terms of asking these questions about what's happening here and what potentially needs to be done. There used to be a path on that photo on the right. There was a 3-foot wide gravel path that went up, that kind of wound up on a long next to the grotto so that you didn't have to use any kind of stairs or anything. And you can see now that path is precipitously on the edge of the stream channel. The only other access to the grotto is immediately off to the side. So if you're looking at that photo on the left, there's essentially there used to be stairs. They've actually taken out the limestone steppers, but just off the right side of the grotto on that photo on the left. And this shows you on the right what that looks like now. So really the access to that is being maintained by the root structure of those smaller trees there at this point. And then this is just to the downstream. So this is on the Forest Reserve property on Gunnar Anderson, and then the parking lot with the little circle down at the bottom of this hill there is off to the left of this. The creek is on the right. And again, there's some continued extensive erosion along the Forest Reserve's property as well. The stream itself is split. About 2/3 of that 1,300 feet is on Kane County property, and then 1/3 is on the Forest Preserve. This is just to summarize some of the information. Again, we know that there's a lot of usage of the grotto. There are visitors that come to the grotto, and that's kind of the primary drawdown there. We know that the paths themselves are not maintained by anybody, and there's no records of that in terms of the Forest Preserve or Kane County staff. We know that visitors that go there, we've seen evidence they actually are when trees fall across the paths and that. There's somebody's going out with a chainsaw every now and then and cutting those up. So we saw evidence of that. And again, the temporary repairs or crossings, if you will, the makeshift crossings for the bridge that's been washed out and that. In terms of, I guess, options or things to consider, certainly the first consideration would be to do nothing and just let it continue to do what it does. There's certainly no cost involved with that, but we've seen that the stream has changed even just in the 8 years that I've been here, in part because of some of the changes and, we're getting these more intense storms that are happening year after year. We had a little bit of a reprieve in 2021, but in the 3 previous years, we had some really bad storms that came through. And that's when we saw a lot of changes in this section. That's when we lost that bridge number 2 that had completely blown out. So that's kind of the first alternative. And then we have kind of 3 other alternatives at the I guess the low end. One consideration would be is to just go in and kind of triage and fix these areas, for example, around the grotto where there are people that are accessing that site, and to address that immediate safety concern. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum would be doing a full restoration of that stream corridor, of that piece of drainage infrastructure that moves through the county and Forest Reserve property. And then certainly there would be some type of a middle ground in between, and maybe doing a phased approach and only fixing the key areas and then addressing some of those other things as you saw fit. So our recommendation is Roger and I and the others that were down there looking at that. What we're proposing to do is to hire an environmental consultant, an engineering firm to actually do essentially a phase 1 assessment of this, to say, look, these, we know where the bad areas are, but to basically give us a better idea of how bad these are and what some of the options would be, and then the costs associated with those options. Again, with getting input from you all in terms of what the overall intended or projected use and desires would be for that portion of the property. And with that, I'll turn it over to Roger. Questions?
Summing up, or anybody have any questions for either Roger or, yeah, right. Rob.
Well, I mean, you were there, Monica Myers was there. Did the Forest Preserve weigh in on, they may have expertise on staff to avoid hiring another engineer to tell us these things?
Well,
Is that something that was already discussed?
I refer that to the staff, but I think we want to work in consort with the county on
I think Based on what we've understood to this point, getting this kind of preliminary assessment of what is the condition and what are the types of things that are done to remedy this type of issue would be good research for us. I talked with Rob about getting 2 or 3 estimates for that type of work and getting proposals that we could bring back to create a budget for this. This is not something that is in any particular budget to do remediation or stabilization of the creek, or even to work. We're not in the business of creating paths and trails. So the good part for the county is that the grotto and the path on the forest preserves part of this is in much better condition, and it's on flat ground, doesn't cross streams. So there's a logical path from the circle drive down below that goes straight to the grotto, which is relatively, a good path, let's say. The erosion of the trees, the makeshift passing of the creeks and other things, I think, are the parts that we were most concerned about. The erosion and trees falling and the proximity of the erosion to the grotto is kind of at the line where the county and the forest preserve meet. So most of that bad erosion right by the grotto is like right on the line where we meet. So that's probably the highest priority. But I think that what we would get from Rob would be the proposals for that initial study. And I think that the work to do that is in the $10,000 to $20,000 range, but we won't know until he gets the proposals. And then we would bring those back for consideration, because they're going to tell you kind of a rough order of magnitude of these. How much does this involve if you start engineering the solution to fix, or do you only target certain phases of this to protect certain amenities that you want to protect? And then lastly, because of the hazards of the crossings and the rain flows and stream, and also the height of some of the erosion, we had discussed closing the path and posting some signs that say that the path is closed. So as you enter the path from behind the memorial out here and head down through the forest, you'll find the first pedestrian bridge, which is in our first crossing path, and it's in better condition than the second, but the railings and the bridge itself is not in good repair, and it is probably a liability. The second passing is not a passing. It's somebody threw what looks like a piece of an old door across the creek. It's probably more
Rustic.
landfill, so trying to close the path to get it to where we don't have anybody back there trying to cross these things and getting injured would be probably our first step, which we talked about that day. So we have some signs to put up there. Basically, they just say path closed. And there's still access from near the river on the east side that people could still take. But that was something that we wanted to propose as well. And then also getting the study to kind of understand what the rough order of magnitude of this would be.
And I think we'll see this on the Forest Preserve side from a perspective of the Forest Preserve, which is
Sure.
very butts right up to it, but includes the grotto. And that step right around the grotto there is we saw the slide there. It's 8 inches wide and way down.
Right.
Mr. Martin?
In the short term, I'm definitely in favor of closing that pathway to the point of, even if we've got capacity in-house, taking the bridges out. I mean, just not leaving them, because to me, they're an attractive nuisance. In the long term, I think this, we've talked about a plan here. We need to have an idea as to what happens to this campus in the future. If we're going to keep it forever, that may impact what we want to do. If this is going to be sold in the context of a move, then it becomes someone else's issue. I can tell you that stream has, because I see it all the time. I play golf at Geneva Golf Club.
Mhm.
When you say it drains up near Randall Road, and there was a point in time when the Jewel store dumped gallon after gallon of sour milk into the storm sewer, and it all ended up in our pond. So I can tell you that's how direct the drainage is. And I can remember more than one time after heavy rainstorms crossing Cheever, and the creek crosses the road above ground. So it has immense changes in flow. And we probably, at least in my mind, are going to end up saying we've got to, until we know what we're doing, we at least got to shore up the erosion, because it's crazy what it does. But I would support getting the bids so we know what we're talking about.
Okay, Mr. Froz?
I guess I kind of started the ball rolling on this, talking to Monica, thinking it was on Forest Preserve property, mostly about the erosion by the grotto, because
Mhm.
again, I've seen it move about 10 feet over the years. But just a little background, those big boulders you see that aren't natural, those were the original. There used to be two big masonry boulder bridges that washed out over time, and the boulders all separated.
There you go.
And that path was the Stations of the Cross. So they would have a mass at the grotto and then do the Stations of the Cross down the path. And that concrete base you see is one of the cross bases.
Right. I know you had mentioned about the stream moving over time too, and I didn't have time to put it in this slide, but I did see that. And I think, as you had mentioned, after one of the big floods, I don't know if it was the 96 flood or if it was before that, but the stream channel actually used to come this way and it went across this property. And then you can see that very intentionally in the old aerial photos that we have for this area. But then there was a flood, and
There was a fence on the lot line, and during a huge flood, it clogged with brush and debris, and the creek made a left-hand turn, and in one night dug that channel that these got highlighted all the way to the river in one night. So the neighbors suddenly didn't have a creek anymore.
Unfortunately, from the Forest Preserve's perspective, the Army Corps doesn't allow people to say, well, the stream used to go that way, and let them put a plug in there and kick it the other way. So they're kind of forced to deal with it now.
But I guess my thinking is get the study, but just like we've talked about, I think 3 different times today, maybe building 2 new bridges would be very expensive. The creek wants to do what it wants to do, and it wants to eat up that trail. And if we have the secondary access to the grotto, but I would say protect the grotto and then maintain it.
And again, that's a decision by the Forest Preserve, since that's on the
Preserve.
Forest Preserve side. Mr. Froz? And then
Fronczak.
Madam Chair.
So this
I mean,
is
Mr.
Roger
Fronczak,
Fronczak
sorry.
again. Yeah, just to clarify for the path closed signs, if you could, yeah, that's the slide I wanted. Thank you. The dotted yellow or dotted orange that you see as you go to the upper left, you'll see where it comes off the front of the campus here. So we're thinking one at that point, one at the crossing just below that where bridge number 1 is.
Okay.
A sign there saying path closed. And then down where the second crossing, where that fork is between that one piece of the fork goes over to private property, but at that fork before the second crossing, and then down as you get to where it's really eroded by the grotto, we'd put another sign. I don't know if that's too many signs, but it's at the points where we know that somebody, if they are down there and trying to cross, those are probably the pain points that we would worry about. And it would be clear that the path is closed at that point.
Better to err on the side of caution, because now that we've discussed this in an open
Sure.
meeting, we are
have
are
some.
responsible and are culpable for
I
it.
think the signs are ready
Not
too,
parking
aren't
it.
they?
They're here.
The signs are here.
I've
so-
walked it. There's no safe place, no safe way to walk those
Right.
paths.
And I think the Forest Preserve has signs as well for their side of the,
Yeah, I believe they were having maybe a different approach about where or what to sign, because their entry is actually in, I think, the fairest condition, as opposed,
Right.
that's the best way to say it, as opposed to our entrance, which is on a hill going over the creek twice.
depends on
And
how you
lots-
want to get into it, over the roots or right next to the 7-foot bank.
Yeah, right next to the drop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Path.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I agree with what Mr. Martin has said, and I'll say it again. We should not put money into restoration or repair unless we know our long-term plan and its needs. I think that's critical. We forefront until a decision is made. The grotto, however, has gotten a lot of press lately because of its restoration. It has an active following and a local all the way from Batavia throughout the Fox Valley of people doing this. So we have to make sure that there is Forest Preserve, it's on Forest Preserve property, that there is a safe and adequate and path to get there. The signage needs to say, because I think there's right now just a little yellow sign that points to that entry of the path off of the circle driveway. Perhaps we can, actually, the Forest Preserve, if they'd like to
Forest
do,
Preserve.
say, grotto this way so that people are directed. I also think that one bridge that's with the rustic bridge with the fallen trees and the door should be eliminated as quickly as possible. It looks like a lot of fun to cross, but I would suggest not. And the other bridge, I'm not sure what the cost would be to remove that, but that may be something we want to consider.
Just wood.
Part of
But
the,
there's always a cost. There's
part of the
always a
long-term
cost.
plan we're talking about, at least on the county side.
That would be our other direction is, do you want the bridges, removed both? One, certainly the plank,
Mhm.
and then secondarily, the other bridge is more substantial, would
Yeah.
require some more, probably some more thought about what it would take to take it out. But if that's the
Yeah, you're not
direction
gonna-
that the committee gives us, we could get, the proposal to take those. The one we won't get a proposal for, it's just picking up the wood, but the other one, we might have to have somebody look at how you'd take it apart other than just go out there and dismantle it.
The direction so far is signs, at least.
Signs are done.
To
I'll have that done.
keep people from going in there. And Mr. Berman?
Yes, Birmingham. We'll find out, I guess, what it's going to cost to do these things. But if we restore that, wouldn't that increase the value of our property and future sales or future?
Well, it's forest it's on the forest preserve.
The-
So
the grotto is.
the grotto is.
Well, but the rest
Are
of
you
the,
talking about the bridges and things?
yes.
Well, it depends on what they
Mr.
use it for, I
Chairman,
guess. What-
One
Mr.
of the
Fonsa.
conversations that we had about this was doing it in phases, but at the same time, if you repair one of those eroding banks, it's going to create, a rock kind of bank that's going to redirect the erosion to another soft area, of the creek. So, as you're just moving it, to another area. So I think it'd be primarily hardening the area, and reinforcing the area around the grotto. And then the other alternatives that are, on the other parts of this are, creating like these swells and areas where water is eroding and pooling. And it's just, it's just taking its natural course, but they're not threatening structures. So, and if you don't, I guess the question is, the grotto's on the Forest Preserve property, it's their structure.
Yeah.
So,
Could become a
Okay.
Storm sewer.
so bridge number 2 is the one that we would remove the boards, and then bridge number 1, we'd need to look at whether or not that can be
Removed with.
removed, or you wouldn't want to repair it because that implies
No,
that you're putting it back
no.
in use.
But make it so it doesn't look like a bridge, or actually, yeah, removed. It's wooden, right?
So like
Yeah.
as
This one?
You could just go down there.
far as direction, so
both out.
we're talking, my recommendation would be to take out bridge number 1. I bet that could be done by staff. Put up the signs. But I would say as far as erosion, the biggest priority is right, but I think it's on the county property at the front of the grotto.
Starts there, yeah, on the county
The whole
property and
side,
then,
yeah.
and then,
That's the only,
so that's
like,
why
real
we'll have to work
pressing.
together on it, but
Yeah, you really have to do both. Like you said, you can't really start at the property line at the Forest Reserve in order to stabilize it properly and make it permanent. You have to wrap it up around. So it's basically, if you go back to that slide, it's basically 50-50 on,
Yeah.
as you can see right here, it's
First
almost
spot
split.
is right at the end of that white
Yeah.
path.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman.
yeah, okay.
Remove.
Madam Bates.
Can we contract with the Forest Preserve District to do this work and some onto our property?
Well, that would be something, or I'll let Mr.
we can
Fonstock.
work on that.
Yeah, we work with them. We're gonna be working with them,
Proposal.
but yeah,
For today, I'm most interested, and we'll put the 4 signs in. We would remove the 2 bridges. Yes.
Yes.
we consensus to do that. Yes, that's what
I'm just wondering
right.
about the second bridge. It's really just concrete remnants. So, I mean, they could,
it's not to be removed. You just remove the plywood is what
Yes.
you're talking
Yeah,
about for that.
sorry.
It's
Yeah, we're not
really a
removing the
bridge.
concrete, just the wood
No,
structure.
no, yeah.
yeah, that's.
Just
Yeah,
to make
but
it
for
look
both
like, because
bridges.
it's looking like a bridge, kind of.
Mark and
both
I'll do that
bridges?
right after the meeting.
When I was 16, it would look like a
Piece of plywood.
fantastic bridge, something
best bridge in
challenging
the
to go
world.
across, right?
But to be
So-
clear, both bridges, 1 and 2.
So they won't look like bridges, right? But that's.
They'll just be the concrete or the rock.
Right, and you're not removing any of the stone.
Oh.
Yeah, and Madam Bates?
Are we going to make anybody really mad at us, like maybe the Knights of Columbus, if we take out their bridges?
But
They'll still have access.
They can go around
We
the other
are
way.
talking with the Knights of Columbus, the Forest Preserve side, the staff is talking with the Knights of Columbus. They've been approached by the nature of the risk that's involved and that will have to be addressed in one way or another, and we want to work with them. And I believe they're accepting of it because they have seen, well, they're in there all the time, so.
talk about that.
Our priority is, Forest Preserve side is to save the grotto, I believe. We don't want to have anything happen to it, and we have an agreement with them.
Oh.
But
Just-
yes, Mr. Fonstock.
Mr. Kenyon just asked about the bridge's conditions and just the first bridge number 1, the reason we're talking about whether.
Want to go
or not-
back to that slide?
Yeah, whether or not that one is salvageable. The railings on that are all loose and falling apart. The wood is rotting. The deck is not as bad, but the railings are all in pretty bad repair. And that's the question is, if you go in and repair it, are you saying that it's suitable for this use?
You're leading people to where you don't want them to be.
And the only thing to get to next is further in with another,
It's even worse.
yeah.
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 And we're telling them not to go in, and then we're saying, okay, hey,
So
look, here's a.
for now, we could close, you could just close that and say it's closed and just leave it. But put the path closed sign right in there and leave that one. The railing is bad.
I'm apprehensive about leaving something that we know is a hazard and
Yeah.
putting a sign in front of it. I just think we're leaving ourselves exposed. And we owe it, to be a little less crass about it, we owe it to the public to maintain a safe facility.
Yeah.
And if we've got a bridge over our creek that's unsafe, even if we put a sign and say it's unsafe, it just, to me, it doesn't sound like sound risk management.
Getting rid of that.
Got a chainsaw?
Yeah.
It's just a wooden
I-
structure. You're
Yeah.
not trying to move the
I'd
abutment.
like to do it internally. I mean, I thought of going out for bids.
Well, we don't need bids. It
Figured I could
wouldn't be
have
that
done it
expensive
after.
anyway, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think if you lean on the railing, it'll probably come down.
We have volunteers from the committee?
Oh.
No. Okay, so consensus is to remove that bridge and the other one,
Bridges,
and then,
signs.
Signs, tear the bridges
And
down.
Signs.
then the study, we're going to be bringing back the proposals for that, so you can consider those. And if you want to pursue a partnership with the Forest Preserve or one of the studies, we'll have that information available as soon as we get those proposals
What
back.
would be the extent of the study? Would it be just by the grotto? Or?
The first part would be the proposal to look at the stream creek stabilization, and it would be a proposal to look at this holistically and then recommending to pursue areas,
I'm just,
so-
I don't know. I just think, say the study costs $20,000.
yes.
If we haven't concentrated on just what we're talking about by the grotto, it might be
Would be less.
$5,000.
Well, and I can answer that a little bit. When we're talking about stream stabilization, it is important that, we don't just look right at the one area that we have, where you have the acute problem. It's kind of like, it's almost like a your own body, your own health, right? You don't just focus necessarily on just the one little thing. You have to say, well, what's maybe causing the larger issue? So I think that's why it's important that they look at the entire stretch through there. And again, the idea is that the intention of this is that they're not going to do the engineering work. They're basically doing this, what we call a phase 1 assessment. So they're going to go out, first they're going to meet with us. We're going to talk to them about all the different moving pieces and, potential ideas and things like that. Then they're going to go out, they're going to do their assessment of the erosion, note where the spot erosion is occurring, but then look at the whole system in terms of what might be happening to give us an idea of, if we don't do anything, where they would expect things to get worse or how much worse it could be. And then again, giving us a range of alternatives, starting focusing on the grotto and then looking at those other areas and saying, look, this is what it would cost to fix these things as you kind of step that up. But so there wouldn't be any engineering that would be done, but I think that we would get some fairly reasonable or reliable costs, even at that level of assessment of what it's going to cost to do any or all of those repairs. And then again, we can bring those back to the committee and review that and decide from there. I don't know how the public interfaces with this. I mean, from what I see online, those of you guys aren't aware, we're a little tied up now with this gasoline spill that's occurred out at 47 and 64. So we kind of keep tabs on, generally speaking, what's happening with the public. I know that there's interest in this, so I don't know how that interacts then as you move forward with changes to what's happening out here. So just throwing that out there.
So a comment, fresh comment?
I'm gonna reiterate, I guess,
Travis?
that you close it down. I think ultimately, the only access is gonna end up being from the Forest
Forest
Preserve.
Preserve.
My only interest is protecting the grotto. It's already showing us what it wants to do. I don't need to pay for a study to tell me that it's gonna continue to erode in certain places. Water does what it does. There's no stopping it. You stop it in one spot, it goes to another. I don't need them to come do a study and tell me that. Shut it down, take the bridges out, and have them tell us their opinion of what it takes to protect the grotto. That's it.
I agree.
That's all I need.
And I understand what you're saying there. I guess I would point out is that, part of the mission, for example, that we do at Environmental Water Resources is we're meeting with other landowners who have similar problems, and we are giving them guidance and advocating that they do projects to, again, stabilize their stream so that they're, reducing the sediment input. So again, it's not just about the safety aspect, it's the safety aspect for the landowners themselves, but also in terms of for the larger good for the watershed. So I think that's, one of the other motivating factors here besides the immediate safety is that the county does own this part of the stream channel. And just like the Forest Preserve has undertaken other stabilization projects and that from a watershed management standpoint. So that would be the only other consideration to at least having the study done to kind of know exactly what we have and where it could go and what the options would be. And again, I know there's a lot of things to consider there in terms of the long-term use of the property, but anyway.
Okay, Mr. Frost,
I-
comment?
I know what Rob's saying, but I gotta agree with Mark. I just assume, let's put out the fire today and get the bridges out, signs up, and look at that 100-foot stretch or whatever it is. Because who knows what's gonna happen? But if we were to move out of this facility, this will likely become some kind of redevelopment. And
Oh.
likely the Geneva Park District will be looking at that as a park, and they'll probably be doing stream bank restoration and thinking about paths and bridges, and I'd rather let them do it.
Mr. Martin.
And I mean, I tend to agree with my colleagues across the room here. The other thing is that I know this is called the Geneva Creek, but until it gets to the golf club, it's a 4-foot drainage tile that's underground all the way from the jewel store till it gets to the golf club. It goes into a pond, and then there's a stream bed that comes down. So I mean, I know it's a creek. To me, it's a drainage ditch. And I have trouble attaching
Oh.
a romantic viewpoint.
I believe it passes underneath the house over here.
Oh, yeah, there's a
Cheever.
bridge built over it. There's a house on Cheever that's built over
Yeah.
it. And, but as I say, until it gets to the Geneva Golf Club, when it comes into the golf club, it's a 4-foot drainage tile with a grate in front of it. So it's gone the other 3/4 of its existence through a concrete tile. I always laugh when I play that course as to when are the trout ever going to come back, because it's just a drainage ditch.
Sure. But it is regulated, this
No,
stretch here
I
is regulated by
understand
the
the
Army
trick
Corps.
bag that we're in.
It's
but-
considered waters of the US, so we have to regulate it as an environmental
I
resource.
know, but the water flow, to tell you extremes, the water flow is so low that there are times in the summer when the creek simply doesn't exist. It is just, it's a classic drainage ditch. And I just want to be careful before we spend $100,000 on it. That I tend to agree. Let's patch it up and decide what we're going to do with this campus first, and then
Let's do a phase, this is phase
Phased.
one and
So-
later on we can do.
Save the
The
grotto.
But I,
initial review would be just those red areas around the grotto.
Yes.
well,
Okay.
as the chairman, I would like to look, I would like to take the advice of our environmental and water management staff, who is to consider the entire project. I'm not sure how expensive. Maybe we could get an idea, the difference between what it would be to do the study to fix that thing and the whole project. I think that we cut ourselves short by not considering what the staff is, what is, the staff is advising our constituents even that own property, that, and we hold them to be responsible on drainage, things like this, or water runoff that's managed by the Corps of Engineers as well, right? So-
Right. And again, we can control the scope of this, assessment, if you will. And again, we can limit that, and the whole intention was to provide that range of costs and alternatives. And again, just this conversation here will bear very heavily into influencing the scope and the level of effort that they would put into that. Again, considering that if there really isn't the will, or if we know now that there's not going to be, this, intensive effort expended on this,
Just
then.
as long as we know that that's available for us. And I don't tend to disagree with the members of the committee. I think you're exactly right. This should be that stabilized around the grotto. But I'd like to look at the overall picture.
We can use
If
the
it
old,
doesn't cost any money.
we can use the old golf balls in the creek bed for bricklaying.
You
Mr.
got a bucket of
Chairman,
them? Madam,
Yeah,
Bates.
that drainage ditch probably started out as a creek and got covered up by whatever development happened
each
there.
little piece at a time,
And
probably.
there's a movement to daylight some of these creeks, to take them out from under those culverts and try to turn them back into what they started out as. We will not be tearing out your golf course anytime soon, I'm sure. But I believe Rob's point is, we do own this property. We need to be responsible owners. This erosion is causing to the detriment of our Fox River, and we need to be responsible for the erosion that's happening on our land. I'm not a member of this committee. I will not be voting, but someday down the road, I think we need to be responsible about this erosion and fix it. So, thank you.
So. Signs.
I know there are people waiting for the American Rescue
I get it.
Plan, so we have a lot of other agenda items.
Right.
So just the signs, the removal of the bridges, and then ultimately we'll get the proposals.
Proposals, yeah, okay.
And
Which
we-
doesn't
yeah.
obligate us to do anything.
No action
necessarily.
other than just getting the proposals.
But we'll get a lot of heat from the environmental committee if we don't.
no, no
We'll move with
offense,
that.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam, yes, Alan? Miss Allen?
This is Alan, and I've been
Yes.
waiting for a while, so I don't mean to delay the committee, and I'm not on the committee, but I'd
Not
like
at
to
all.
speak here. We talk all the time about best management practices, BMPs. We say that that is what we as a county strive for. So I would like us to follow Mr. Linky's suggestion. He is an engineer with a certificate on the wall. That's why we hire him, and follow a best management practice to spend $20,000 and figure out what needs to be done here, whether we do it or not. Now, we're not going to leave this campus for, let's say, 5 years. It would take us a while to build a new building. And the people who actually use this beautiful area are people who visit the Veterans Memorial and our own staff, people who take their lunch break and come into this area to restore themselves so that they come back and do the heavy lifting for the county. So I would like to ask, what would be the cost of putting a decent railing on the bridge that exists there, so that if people want to walk in that area, they can cross that bridge once and twice. They can just use that bridge to move around the property. What would be the cost of that as part of this project? So I hope I get to vote somewhere down the line. Thank
Oh,
you.
you'll get a vote somewhere. Thank you for your input. It's always good insight. Thank you.
Mr.
Mrs.
Chairman,
Allen.
we can
And
look into that,
Roger
but
Fonstock.
I think taking, having one bridge and not the other leads a person to even further down the trail where they'd have to cross where there is no bridge. So you'd be looking at 2 new bridges, and then the discussion was whether or not you're creating, a defined trail or walkway that you have to maintain once you start putting amenities in there. It's not, it's a footpath.
I think the Forest Preserve was reticent to acknowledge any of this as trails. And it's not their property, of course, but would not want to even accept they were glad they didn't have to accept the responsibility of trying to do anything with that trail in the condition it's in.
Mr. Chairman, our staff walk around there anyway. So they will walk where it's safe. And if they walk too far and have to walk back to one bridge, that's what a walk is for. It's not that big a deal.
Thank you, Ms. Allen.
I think we're done.
Okay, I think we're set. I
Okay.
think we're going to move on anyway.
Got it.
We're going to move somewhere that doesn't cost us money, just the
Excellent.
signs and the study.
So we are beyond item E. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Linky, that was great. Good
Item-
slides.
Thank you.
Item F is a resolution authorizing the payment of invoices from Cordigan and Clark Associates.
Can I have a motion in a second, please?
Raz moves.
Faraz,
Berman second.
Berman,
Okay, this is a resolution authorizing the payment of invoices totaling $40,700 to Cordigan and Clark. So one-time payment. This was a project for the canopy and enclosure behind the circuit court clerk's office. This work's completed and we have the invoices in hand. The work originally was done, I believe, under the Cordigan and Clark extension of their agreement. But we're asking for specific authorization for the $40,700 to be perfectly clear that the board has approved of it.
okay. Any questions, comments? Mr. Martin?
Just want to clarify, this is one of the residual responsibilities that they retained when we changed architects. Is that correct?
This was, in my understanding, it was in the transition period. I don't know if it was already started before we actually did the award to the 3 architect, engineer, and construction manager at risk. I believe this happened
But it was
at
a
the same
contract-
time.
It was a contract in process at that time.
They would have, so the resolution authorized them to extend their agreement for completing projects.
Right.
The contract itself authorizes them to be our architect, our engineer, and our contract management for construction management. So the contract says one thing, the resolution basically, in my opinion, says that they were to finish projects. I believe this was started after that period of time. So it was not a project that was being finished, but it was done under the Cordigan contract that was out there. And this was started, I think, sometime in the fall of last year. So, but the company that did the work is Maryville Awning. They were the subcontractors, and the payment of these invoices pending to pay the contractors that did the work. And the work is done. It's complete. The awning and enclosure has been done.
Mr. Davist?
My only concern in it would be if they were able to link this in any way to the garage door opening situation. And it sounds like it's
Unrelated.
completely separate. So, all
Different building.
right.
So this was
Can't be
grandfathered
done.
in?
Well,
I don't know that I describe it that way. It's invoices that are due.
Okay.
And this was work that was done according to my understanding. There was a contract for architect, engineering, construction with Cordigan that was extended. I think the issue is that in the resolution, the extension was contingent upon it being a project that was already started. So if it's something they're closing or something they're finishing, I do not believe this was something they were closing or finishing. So therein lies the issue. So we're seeking, you do have a contract in place with Cordigan that was to do this type of work. It's just that the actual resolution says for projects that they're finishing. So it's just to clean it up, make sure that we have approval of the board for $40,700 with Cordigan.
no
for
matter
this
who
project.
started it or when they started it, they did the work and it's completed.
Yes, it's done.
Yes, it's done. So any other
Question.
questions or comments?
It's a done deal.
Alan,
Ms. Allen? Mrs. Allen?
When I looked at the invoices, it looked like that some of that $40,000 is actually paying for the awning and the hardware. And is that not correct? Is this all $40,000 just a payment to Corday and Clark? Or does it include does it include the awning and stuff?
So this would be the Maryville invoices for the awning, the walls, the poles, the support, the overhead management of the project, which was done by Cordigan, which was construction management. They also designed it. So it would be, in their contract, they're allowed or authorized to do architect, engineering, and construction. So it was done under those three categories is what I would describe it as. And then they bid the awning out or priced it out through their process with the county, and they did the work, completed it, and these are the invoices.
So it's the entire project.
The entire project, yes.
So that's a pretty good deal.
Mhm.
And the awning is done, it's up, and I believe it's to the owners and the occupants' satisfaction.
Haven't heard any complaints. So I will call the question then.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Bras,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Caius,
Caius.
yes.
Yes.
Oh, I'd like to.
Executive Director's report. Is this something we need to deal with right now, at least in some
I think we'd
degree?
step down to the resolutions maybe and
It-
defer that and see where you'd like to be when we get the resolutions done.
Okay, so let's, with the indulgence of the committee, we'll move down to information technology.
Yes.
You have a discussion, fiber
Yes.
lease?
So just real quickly, the fiber optic cabling that the county has installed in the ground is roughly 70 miles of fiber. It's about 75. And we, from time to time, get people asking us about leasing the strands of fiber that are in the right of way, that are in the duct and in the cable. In the past, we had an agreement that the county was using to do a revenue share from people using the fiber. They would pay us a percentage of their revenue. We would like to switch to a straight lease. And in doing so, a lot of the overhead of trying to figure out how much revenue and what they've done in the last year, it would eliminate that, and we would do a straight lease, which is based on the value of the fiber plus maintenance. So we're hopeful that we would have that in time for this committee. And I do have information for it, but I think right now it's just premature because we don't have a copy of the draft lease. But the way the lease would work would be specific pricing that's related to the distance of fiber that the person is looking to lease. We have probably 80% of the cable is available capacity. It's not being used by the county. When we put the cable in, we put in 144 strands of fiber most places. And like I said, I think at most we use 24 strands of that. And then we have some other services that are on there. We partnered with NIUNet from Northern Illinois University to do some education and revenue sharing at one point. And again, looking at it over the years, I think the straightforward lease of it would be just better business on our part and less overhead to manage it. We've talked to some of the different people that have an interest in it. There is a strong interest in leasing of the fiber. And we could show you some of the costs associated with that, but I think I would wait until we get the
You're
lease.
asking then to defer this until our next meeting?
Well, that we have some people that would be interested in leasing it in the short term. And so I don't know if this would be something as a lease we could take to finance to explain. It's just revenue. It's not costing, or it's not an expense or an approval of a capital expense. We're talking about a financial revenue lease that someone would pay us to use one of the county's assets.
Mr. Martin?
An assumption that we're willing to follow the recommendation of Mr. Feinstock, I suggest we move the matter ahead. If it's
Okay.
just a financial issue, let the finance.
We would
committee
work with
address
Joe Onzek to see about putting it on finance agenda to consider as a revenue for lease.
All right, then I'll ask
Okay.
for a motion and a second. For
it.
the
Martin
resolution.
moves.
Martin moves.
Have a second.
Davis second.
Better.
Any other discussion, questions?
This is a discussion
Comments?
item, so I think it's just consensus.
It's a resolution?
No, just the first one, A, is
Oh, the first
discussion.
one. Oh, okay.
It's just consensus about the lease.
I apologize.
Yes.
Okay, so then that's a consensus. We don't need a motion second. No
Take that to
objections?
finance.
All right.
Okay.
I apologize. Then item B,
But item B, resolution authorizing fiber optic support services contractors. This was an RFP that we put out with purchasing to solicit companies that do the repair, maintenance, and construction of our fiber cable. Again, it's 72 miles of fiber from Algonquin to Montgomery. And it's all over the county. We had 2 responses, one from National Technology and one from EX2. We're recommending that we authorize both vendors for a 5-year contract and not to exceed $500,000 per year. And it's a budgeted expense. This comes under our network services portion of the public safety sales tax. And we use it to connect our public safety organizations between Aurora, the county, and all the way up to Elgin. So
okay, then I'll ask for a motion and second on this one.
Fraz moves.
Braz,
Berman second.
Berman second. Any questions for Mr. Fonstock? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Berman,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Braz,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Pius.
Yes.
Passed.
okay,
Okay,
we're on to number 8, Mill Creek SSA. We have resolution A. It's
we have-
authorizing a contract extension of Mill Creek SSA Parkway Tree Services.
okay, a motion.
Fraz moves.
Braz, second.
Berman second.
Berman, second.
This is an existing agreement. We're asking for a 1-year extension. We've reviewed this with purchasing. It's here because the extension of the agreement, a multi-year agreement, it's not to exceed $20,456.80 from Henry Tree Company. It's a budgeted expense under SSA. We recommend approval.
SSA has approved it and they're paying for it, right? So,
Yes.
okay, any questions for Mr. Fonstock? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Braz,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Pius.
Yes.
Passed.
Chairman, do we skip the
Yeah, we did.
the
Thank
public
you.
information officer?
We
report?
did, but we got our business done with now. So do we have an item
Yeah.
about the public information
Sure.
officer? Oh, you're
It's
you're
just-
reporting to our committee.
Yes.
It's been a day.
Sorry.
Welcome.
Thank you. No, I'll be brief. I had a presentation, but we can move it to the next committee meeting. We just continue on our social media channels. We've had 39 posts on social media in the last 28 days. One in particular, we spent $10 to boost on Facebook. We reached 17,000 people. People really like recycling stories. We have the most visitors from Elgin, and typically we have more women than men on Facebook, and the age range is 35 to 44. So again, the other thing I wanted to let you know is that we're making progress in updating the Kane County website with the help of Adam Tedder. So that's ongoing too. You can continue to see it's changing every day a little bit. We're cleaning it up, getting rid of old stuff, archiving, and moving things around.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is there a chance then the next, I know you were the last one, see that we have her closer to the front of the, so you don't have to sit, unless you want to sit through the whole damn thing to,
Can move her up
Let's-
the agenda.
okay.
We'll have her go first. That'd be
Yeah,
better, probably.
right behind the judge or something, just in case,
Okay.
especially if you make it that short. What the heck?
Mr. Chairman, is
Be
that,
the presentation?
so she's reporting to the committee every month? That's the,
I believe so.
That's correct.
Yes,
Okay.
to our committee.
all right, we'll add that on the agenda. Okay. Under, let's see, new business, item B, because we addressed item A
And there,
already
no
earlier
vehicles,
with
right.
Chief Judge
Yeah.
Hull.
yes, we did item A.
So item B, advice and consent regarding procurement cards for the IT department and building management. There's a page in the packet where we have listed the people in our 2 departments that have credit cards and the limits. And the new ordinance requires that the committee provide advice and consent about those cards, limits, and the people. Blair, do you have that slide? Charles, do you have that? It's not in the packet?
Let's see it.
You can email it to me or email it to Blair. He can pull it up.
Which isn't unusual.
I don't have it. me see if I have it. Just give us 1 second. We'll have that. It's important to get this done because we are using the cards and I know the ordinance has changed, so. Let me see if I have it. Give me 1 second.
We've got time. We'll just, we've lost all those people that are weak.
You got it,
Oh,
Charles?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. No, Mr. Leonard says we don't have time. I'm sorry. Somebody's shaking their head back there.
Okay.
Sorry, Bill.
Blair, you got it? Okay, I was gonna say I've got it too. There you go. You can blow that up. So what we're recommending is these one-time transaction limits and monthly transaction limits. And what you'll see, there's 3 people with relatively large limits, myself, Charles, and John. The one-time transaction limit is $29,000 and the monthly is $45,000. I would tell you that the only time that gets exercised is if we have generally an emergency or a large purchase that we need to take care of. And it stops at $29,000 because that's the authorization before you have to go out to bid or to competitive. So. But we're recommending approval, and these are all based on budget availability and budget expenses. It's not an authorization to spend the money. It's just the limits.
Okay,
This is a resolution or just a,
It's just advice.
advise and
is
consent.
what
Any
they-
questions for Mr. Fonstock on this?
I support the proposal.
I support it.
I do too. So no, there are no objections. So that's our consent.
Thank you. This will go to finance, I believe, for their advice and consent as well.
Okay.
Item C, discussion, County Code 248.
Haven't done that yet this morning. And you had sent your suggestions or comments
Yes.
in a discussion of 2-48 brief points and discussion regarding county code. I think Mr. Davis said that this was a long-term thing, so I don't know that we need to address it today since we've run long. I think
We're
we can.
still in the assembling things like.
Right,
this
so
part of it.
has everyone on the committee gotten did you send that out to them? as
Believe it
advice?
went out. Yes.
Okay, from Roger. So hopefully I'll be able to touch base with everybody on the committee before next time, at least to kind of get an idea. If you have anything, forward it to me and I'll make sure that the Jamie Labrillo gets it. And Madam Chair, comment?
Thank you. Just as a gentle reminder, we'd like to get this thing completed, this assessment before the new board is seated. So you have
That
a,
next November then,
yeah,
December?
it's the time is running short.
It takes a while, yeah.
So if you want,
Rough.
Blair, they're in the packet on page 198. So it did get sent out. And most of them are just the reporting responsibilities clearly defined.
And that was in particular what the chair of the committee asked for.
Yes. So these were the bullet points that I had sent to Chairman Caius about 248 for consideration.
It's something,
Let's consider it done.
okay. But for staff to write, Labrillo will get it.
I can forward that to Jamie and HR.
Okay.
If you'd like.
And if she has, well, she'll give us feedback on whatever she may need. So
Absolutely.
I think that's a good start.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We do have one item under old business. It's item A, resolution. It's ratifying the county board's authorization of a wage increase for interim executive director of building management department for department heads under jurisdiction of administration committee.
Oh, do we have to do that? No, just
Up to
kidding.
you.
Okay. Then you heard it there, as read by Director Fonstock. May I have a motion? A second?
I'll move it.
Raj seconds.
Davist, Franz. And then discussion, questions. We understand what that one's all about. If there's no questions, we'll just go to the question. I'll ask for the question.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Davis, yes.
Braz,
Raj, yes.
Martin,
Martin, yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes.
Approved.
Okay.
Good work.
Thank you. So the only other item that we had for today was the Administration Committee Executive Director's Report, which I'm going to tell you will be an hour-long discussion.
Yeah.
Plus.
Are there highlights that we need to hear about right now?
There are a lot of.
That we need to
things that
hear
need
about
be
right now.
discussed, but knowing there's a meeting that's already 25 minutes or so past.
Hour
Fred-
and
Fry speaking, what timing on this? What, I mean, if it was really critical, we could,
Well,
I hate to say it, but we could call a special admin meeting, piggyback it on some upcoming meeting.
I do think it's that important.
all right.
I do. I think you need to have a discussion about all of the things that, and it gives you time to review this a little bit more, maybe, because I sent it out Friday, the final version. It is a lot of information. There's a lot of things that we're looking at and considering. So I think a special meeting just to go through this would probably be worthy.
So it would be, have
um,
to be next week sometime.
Could I propose
the
that
soonest?
Mr. Fonstock and Chairman Caius look at the calendar and pick a logical,
I'm looking at the calendar next Tuesday after development would be the first day.
Or-
There's already a meeting.
After development?
The elected officials salary.
Yes. Yes, I haven't checked that out.
What's after development?
Yes, it is.
It's the elected officials salary increase
review.
review committee. Thank you.
And is there overlap with this committee? I guess we can't do two committees.
It's after development.
Could be after legislative on Wednesday or after ag on Thursday or jobs on Friday.
Let's do Wednesday.
Members of the committee, any comments about that? Special meeting then for this report.
What time will that be?
That will be at 11 a.m., assuming they do not run long.
What day was it?
Wednesday, the 20th,
At 11?
11.
So Wednesdays.
Will that be suitable, Mr. Fonstock?
Just 1 second. I'm looking, when is Finance Committee? Is there,
Finance is on the 27th.
Okay.
Wednesday,
Till the next week.
so any byproduct from that meeting could still make the agenda for finance if we needed it. Okay.
I'm sorry, so what were you looking at? Which day?
I had it the 20th, April 20th,
Okay, Wednesday, the 20th, after legislative.
after legislative.
I'll be in touch with Roger. We'll have to get together for the
Is that
agenda.
okay with staff?
Yes, that's fine.
Staff here okay with that? Staff, they're okay with that? Committee okay with that?
Look at it. Even better.
Oh, then Blair's doing the agenda? Yeah. Right, for admin. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I got kerfuffled here. I had my calendar for a second, it disappeared. Okay,
I move replace reports on file.
motion by Martin, second by Davist. That's to place the reports on file. Roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Ford, Braz,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Pius.
Yes. No need for
Adjourn.
executive session.
I move we adjourn.
Martin, move to adjourn.